No.
Hi, Linda.
Yes.
Hi, Linda.
Yes.
Hi, Linda.
We find ourselves, welcome to our our very first webinar as public librarians. And I see there's more librarians more than public librarians. So thank you so much for joining us. We were all sitting and going on with our lives as normal. And Corona decided.
And now?
Can everybody hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Yes? Oh, okay, thank you. So as we were sitting at our own spaces and going on and planning and saying, we're gonna have a fabulous 2020, coronavirus said, oh no, you have forgotten I'm here. So we found ourselves being at home and facing a lot of challenges, not only our social challenges, but now we're gonna face the challenges of going back to work. So we sat down as the committee and we were thinking, what is it that we can do so that we can get a platform where everybody can share their ideas? So we thought we must do this webinar. So our president-elect, Nazeem, will take us through to a PowerPoint presentation, which is not long, so that we can have time to share ideas at the end. And right at the end, you can just raise your hand up, and I think Anna-Marie will point out on you, and then you can ask questions that Nazeem can try, and everybody in the room. So we must keep it as casual as we can, so that everybody can be able to participate. Over to you, Nazeem.
Okay, thank you very much, Linda. So again, formally, good afternoon, everybody. I've never done this before, so it's a first, I think, for me, and probably for some of you as well. So let's just see how it goes. I don't want to make it too formal while we're talking about something that I think is very serious. I want to keep it as informal as we can, and I want us to feel our way through this and not going to say, you know, I'm going to talk for so long and then I'm going to let you ask questions. I think if you have questions, you ask the questions or you type the questions in the chat, or whatever makes you feel comfortable. I think that's how we're going to do this. We kind of schedule this for about an hour, so from 2 to 3. I have put together something. I'm not necessarily going to stick to it to the nth degree, but we'll see how this goes, and certainly we'll see what we learn from all of this, and then we'll take it from there. To kind of latch on to what Linda started off saying, we got an email from someone in the public, not in the public library, in the school library sector, a couple of weeks ago, where the person, you know, when the minister had originally indicated that teachers would go back, and a librarian sent an email saying they're really worried because school libraries are not mentioned anywhere in the minister's presentation, and they worried about going back to work. So of course we started working on, you know, what would we kind of advise to school librarians, but then also realized that we'd have to start looking at each one of the sectors. And while I think some of the principles are kind of the same for each one of the sectors, for each one it is also very different. And I've kind of rather put things together not as a this is how it has to be, or this is what LIASA says it must be, but it's more ideas, and it's kind of places for you to actually go and look at if you haven't looked at these things before. I find it very interesting in this time that I think as a profession globally, there's a lot of sharing going on. And I think it's comforting in the sense that that saying of library, I think it's comforting in this time, in that, again, you know, libraries and librarians are sharing their things, their thoughts, their information, their experiences. There are places in the world that's already started reopening. New Zealand, Denmark, one or two other places, and they're starting to post what it's like for them to actually start going back. And and kind of wanting all of us to also learn from what they're doing. So again, let's see how this goes, and hopefully we'll be able to share ideas and things. So just to say that Anna Marie is driving the presentation. We tried to make it work where I would share it. To the person who said I can't hear a thing, maybe you must just unmute your screen. Just look for the mute unmute button, and then hopefully see if you can hear something. Okay, so Anna Marie will drive the presentation, so sometimes we won't always get it right and we'll maybe be out of step, but if needs be, I'll tell her to move on. And yeah, so let's go. So Anna Marie, so as you all know by now, I'm Nazeem, I'm the President-elect of LIASA, and welcome to this webinar. Anna Marie, you can go on. Okay, so I kind of put this there. It's one of my favorite tweets. I see it periodically from the person on the screen that you see tweeted originally. And he periodically tweets some of the same things that he says. And I see this very often, and I've shared it on a couple of occasions, and I've liked it more than once. And I think it's very apt for kind of where we are at the moment. And it says, in a crisis, you lead from the front; in a celebration, lead from the back. And only the very best leaders practice this. So I'm going to talk a little bit about in the next couple of slides, and I'm not going to dwell on the subject. I think there are people who know more about this than I do, but just a little bit about management versus leadership. And I think it's an important thing to kind of think about in the situation that we're in. We're all going back, or we're all preparing to go back to work. For example, I go to work twice a week. I go for about 4 hours just to get deliveries, to see that we pay suppliers, because I think for them it's really a tough time, especially small vendors. You know, they're relying on the fact that this is a financial lifeline for them. So it's been interesting going back. I only have 2 of my staff with me, and it's a break to the routine of having been at home for so long and working from home. But yeah, so to the whole thing around management versus leadership, you know, we all look at management and we say, you know, what is management doing? When we look at, Anna Marie, if you can maybe just go to the next slide. So if we look at management, I mean, those are kind of the basic things related to management: planning, organizing, controlling, the things that we all know. And that's what we need to some degree when we all go back to work. If we go to the next slide, then we'll see what I've kind of put there is, you know, there are certain skills that you've got to know when it comes to these things. Technical skill, conceptual skills, interpersonal skills. And I think what we've seen through this pandemic is that a lot of the things are important, but it's very often the softer skills that are actually coming to the fore. You know, how do we do interpersonal skills? I think when we go back, a lot of it is going to be dependent on how we manage people rather than a situation. And I want to say that, you know, these things are, if you look at the slide that's there, they're very interconnected. And even if we know all of these things, we're going to have to think about them very differently. If you look at the next slide, when Anna Marie puts it up, you'll see those are kind of library management skills. We look at technical skills, communication skills, problem solving, decision making, leadership, all of those things. And yes, they are important, but that's in a kind of normal environment. I'm trying to avoid as far as possible using the words the new normal. It's starting to become, one of those phrases that you maybe don't want to hear anymore, because we all know we're going into the new normal. But we've also got to move to a space where I think we know we don't need to talk about the new normal anymore. There is a normal, and that normal looks very different from what we used to. So these are the kind of things that I think we rely on. But then if we move to the next slide, then we start talking about management versus leadership. They're two very different things. So if we look at the top one, where it talks about management skills, it's the ability to execute the vision, the ability to direct, the process management, people focused. But then if you look at kind of the traits that a leader possesses, it's vision, honesty, and integrity, inspiration, communication skills, and ability to challenge. And the thing about leaders is it's not necessarily the person in charge. It's very often not always the person in charge. But I think we all have a role to play here. And it's, do we see ourselves as a leader? If I just think about the biggest library we have in the city of Cape Town, that functions on multiple floors, the person in charge of that facility can't be everywhere. So we need leaders in our spaces to take charge and to lead and to see that some of these things that we're going to put in place are actually working, that both the public and our staff are actually able to execute some of these things. And I think one of the things that we have to take away from our president's message now the other night, and I think he's correct when he says, there's only so many things that government can do. And we all point fingers at government, we say government must, government must, government must. But there comes a point where we've got to say, but what have we got to do? And like the president rightly says, it's now up to us. How do we manage this new space that we're going into? On the next slide, I kind of put up what I think we all know needs to happen. We've all been told this from day one. Wear a mask, wash your hands, cover your mouth with a tissue, etc. These are the things that, no matter what else has happened within this crisis, has been consistent. It's been a consistent message. And again, it's got to be consistent when we actually go back to work. And we've got to see that we implement it, that we practice it, that we see that our staff do it. We've heard stories of people who, they go to work, everybody knows what the rules are, and even within a health setting, people don't necessarily wear their mask the way they're supposed to. People don't wash their hands the way they're supposed to. The next thing you know, suddenly somebody tests positive, and then you've got to react. And by then it's a little bit too late, because now it affects everybody. So I think much as we've got to look at the physical aspects of our workplace and what we've got to put in place, we've also got to look at how do we manage our staff. As a library, I believe that we in the information business, we provide information for people that's supposed to be accurate, that's supposed to be factual and verified and checked and all of those things. But how do we make this known to people? We can put up all the signs, and we know people don't always read our notices. But if we start practicing what it is that's got to be in place, we as librarians have got to take the lead and show people that this is actually what is required from you. Imagine the first day you actually open and the public is allowed into your library space. If they walk in and they don't see you wear a mask, or you don't have gloves on, you cough all over the place, you don't use a tissue, etc. Kind of what example is that you're setting? So I think first and foremost, as a library manager, and also as a staff member, and that's kind of where your leadership skill comes in. You've got to see, that as a staff, this is what you're actually implementing. Okay, so the next couple of slides talks about what do we do when we actually open. As we now all know, the expectation is, I think, that we'll all start moving back to work from the 1st of June in some form or other. I think probably what most places will start looking at is that a third of their workforce starts moving back. Some places it's easy to do that. In other places it's not. I know of a particular library that is, smaller than most houses. And how do you practice that when in this particular library I'm thinking about, the librarian in charge doesn't have an office. The desk, the circulation desk is an office. There isn't a staff workroom. There isn't a separate kitchen. They all share one communal space. How do you actually practice social distancing in a space like that? So it's going to be easier in some places more than others. But I think there are basic things that you've got to think about when you start looking at reopening libraries. And again, if you've maybe just joined, I just want to reiterate what I'm putting on the slides here, what LIASA is putting out or will eventually put out. It's not to say that this is how it must be. What we've tried to gather here again is things that we've seen, things that we've read about, things for you to think about. Because in each one of your localities, whether it is an academic school, special public library, your authority will in some ways decide how things will work. But how you actually implement it within your particular space is entirely up to you, I think. The basic principles will remain the same, but you've got to assess your situation and say, how do I actually make this work? So I think when we open libraries, these are the kind of main things we got to think about. We got to think about limiting numbers in library. We got to think about limiting concentration of users, promoting hygiene, staff safety. I think is paramount. If we can't keep our staff safe, then we should think about, do I actually open? Because without the staff there, you can't do a service. So that probably should have been the first bullet point. But I think we've all been told that, there must be PPE in the library. There must be hand sanitizer, there must be masks, there must be gloves, etc. So if those things are not in place, you've obviously got to approach your employer and say, but where are these things? We need these things before we can actually open. The LIASA can't say that to your employer. I mean, we can obviously recommend those things. And it's in line with what government says needs to happen. But I think we've all seen the news. I mean, even frontline health workers don't necessarily always have the equipment that they're supposed to. But I think there's a little bit of personal responsibility in all of this that comes into play as well. And I think, again, yes, there's an expectation that things must be provided to us. But what if they're not? What if you have to go to work and you have to be, even if you don't open to the library, I think it is still your personal responsibility to wear a mask. It is your personal responsibility to practice social distancing. That's entirely up to you. I mean, we all see what is happening in the United States in some places. That's not how any of us, I would like to believe that nobody's going to behave like that here. But sometimes when you drive around and you look at people and you think, yeah, is the message actually getting through? Anyway, digressing. The last two things, they're handling materials. I think it's an important aspect of what people are talking about. I think there's still no definitive answer as to how long a virus like this lasts on material. And we've got to be careful around these things. Do you quarantine? Don't you? I posted something now the other day on Facebook. In Denmark, in this particular library, the recommendation is that they don't have to quarantine library materials. But that kind of goes against, I think, what else I've actually read about, where most, I think, library authorities are recommending that library materials be quarantined for at least 24 hours. Certainly in my workspace, even before we went into lockdown, when we get boxes of books delivered, I try to let it stand for 24 hours to have it sprayed down, the boxes at least, before we actually start handling and unpacking anything. And in the last 10 years, public communication, I think it's really important that we actually communicate. Yes, again, there are messages all over the place from government, from your local authority, from everybody. But I think it's also important that everybody also looks at the communication that they have up in their workplace. I think the more we reinforce the message, the better. Anna-Marie, if you can go to the next slide. This slide I've just taken from the Australian Library Association, and if you do have the time and you want to look at something really good, I would suggest that you go and look at the ALIA website, that you do look at the materials that they posted there. I think they're really good at what they do. And one of the things that they posted there was kind of a framework in terms of when they're going to open libraries. Looking at things like planning, communications, staff support, community support, looking at the current status, whether restrictions are eased, when restrictions are lifted, and slowly moving towards a space where you can start looking at, what is the next step. I'll talk a little bit towards the end about, what are we looking at in terms of opening libraries, but again, that's how I see it. It's not necessarily how it is going to be blanket wise across the country for every type of library. Next slide, Anna-Marie. So in looking at management of staff, again, this is kind of a repeat of some of the things that I've said. We got to look at, social distancing between colleagues. And again, your space will determine how you actually do this and whether you can do this. Regular hand washing and sanitizing. And kind of when I wrote this, this morning I went on Facebook and I saw somebody commenting about hand washing and sanitizing, and it really made me stop and think for a moment, where this person said, that's all good and well in a metro situation, but outside of a metro, where a public library doesn't even have a fully functioning toilet, doesn't have running water, how do you make this work? And I think it's a question that's been posed to government since day one. If we look at informal settlements, where there isn't necessarily running water, or not necessarily clean running water, how do you practice hand washing and sanitizing? And again, I think these are the things that we've got to look at. Do we have a workspace that is conducive to us actually opening? And it's easy to say, but I think everybody has to kind of look at this situation and say, is it safe for me to actually open and actually have a service? Or what kind of service can I render in this kind of situation? Wearing masks, I think that's a given. Cleaning and sanitizing of library materials, and quarantining of returned items. Kind of put these things under headings, and sometimes they fall under other things. So just bear with me. They're not. You might think they're not under the right heading, but they kind of overlap all of these things. In terms of hand hygiene, I kind of said they're at a bare minimum. You need to have a sink. You need to have soap and water. Alternatively, you must have an alcohol-based hand sanitizer that must be available. Moving on, and while we're still talking about managing staff, that staff must wear disposable gloves when you handle return materials. when you handle chemical cleaning agents, when you're cleaning library materials, that once you remove the gloves, and I think it's still debatable about whether gloves actually work, but for now, I think that's what's been recommended, that once you take off the gloves, you've got to practice hand hygiene. It is really important that we do these things, and that you dispose of the gloves in a bin or in another designated unit after you remove them from your hands. I have read that gloves actually is not the best thing to use when you actually handle things, because they carry germs more often. But again, rather be safe than sorry. And when we look at what is available to us, when we start looking at reopening, these are the things we've got to look at. Do we have them readily available? Moving on, Anna Marie. Okay, managing collections. So I've said it before. I've seen this one library in Denmark that now doesn't quarantine their collections, but I think most places have recommended that you quarantine materials coming back. There is still the study ongoing in the United States, where they kind of running tests as to determine how long a virus will actually last on the various library materials, but we're still waiting for the outcome of that one. And my recommendation would be that as long as we don't have a definitive answer, that we should separate return items from regular items. That if your library allows it, you've got to designate an area that will be dedicated for those items to be returned to, whether it is in a box, whether it is on a trolley, whether it is on tables, etc. See that it doesn't go automatically into the normal collection immediately, that you leave it for at least 24 hours before you actually handle it, that you do clean it. Obviously with paper-based materials, you can't really use liquid on them, you're going to damage them, and then it's important that they actually be left for 24 hours. But things like CDs, plastic covers on books, you should be able to we should be able to wipe that down with the sanitizing material, and that should work. And the next slide, Anna Marie. In terms of the library building, I think it is important that there be hand sanitizer available. I think about this person who commented this morning on Facebook to say, what if there isn't running water? Then we should try and see that there is hand sanitizer available. We should also see that it is, I think, available throughout the library, and that people can readily access it and actually sanitize their hands. That we should see that there's regular cleaning of the library, especially tabletops, shelves, circulation desks, etc. Clean and disinfect public computer equipment between uses. In those libraries where you've got tablets, for example, where headphones is provided by the library, that you prevent the sharing of those things. I think as far as possible, you probably shouldn't have headphones available that can be shared, and rather have people bring their own headphones. I don't know how possible that is, but I think it's important that we think about, what is needed to keep our staff safe. That there be signage in the library, things that notes to people what is required from them, what you require to keep your staff safe, yourself safe, etc. And that there be floor markings. So, for example, at a circulation desk, there should be floor markings that designates the space that should be between people. As far as possible, you should have it outside the library as well when people are queuing. Like we see at the shopping malls and at our local shop, etc. It's important that we have these things in the library. Next one, Anna Marie. Okay, so in terms of the public, and I'm almost done talking. Like I said, there should be signage that promotes social distancing. There should be floor markings that indicates the space between people. As far as possible, we should rearrange furniture. I would go so far as to say, and I've seen it recommended elsewhere, that in order to enforce social distancing, you should actually remove furniture and put it into storage if you can. So, for example, if you look at tables, and in a lot of our libraries, they get used as study spaces, etc. You can't have people sitting the way they used to. So if needs be, you need to remove a couple of tables, you need to remove a couple of chairs, then that's what you have to do. Where it is possible that you have a separate entrance and exit, or that you limit the movement of how people move through one entrance, if it serves as one space. One of the interesting things I think that we're starting to see happening where people are opening is limited open hours, and open hours for specific community groups. I posted something yesterday, and I'll play you the video at the end, where the morning, they basically open for you to actually phone in and say, I want the following things. And in the afternoon, they basically work from the foyer, and that's where they actually make materials available. Also, the next one talks about limited open spaces to the public. I see a lot of libraries don't necessarily make the children's area an open space immediately. Obviously, meeting rooms, not necessarily. Where you've got cafes, toilets seem to be a big no-no. That you should limit the number of people in the library. You should limit the period of time people spend in the library. And it's a really difficult one in a space like South Africa, I think, where so many people come to the library to use it as a study space. You know, how do you limit people's period of time in the library if they all come there to study because they don't have the space available in their house? And it's a reality that we face all the time. We cannot deny the social conditions outside of the library. A library is not an insular space. We're part of a greater, but those are things that we've got to think about. The next one too, you know, removing PCs to create space between terminals. And we all know so many people rely on the library to access the internet, to access a computer. How do you make this work? Because you're gonna have to maybe put different time limits on PC sessions in order to make the availability of computers better for people. And as far as possible, you need to limit the numbers for face-to-face activities. It's really important. And again, I think that one of the things that we've really got to think about is how do we keep our staff safe? Next slide. I promise I'm almost done talking. Linda and her team has worked on recommendations and guidelines for public libraries. I've put the link there. It is available on the LIASA website. Again, it's not a definitive list of things, but it's a thing for people to start thinking about. Some people have started sharing with Linda what they're doing in their particular municipality. And I think a lot of these things are really interesting. And going back to a point I made right at the beginning, I think as a community, as a global community, we see a lot of sharing in this profession. And I think it's a great thing. I think more and more we need to do these things, because I think as we're learning, it's the only way we're going to overcome this, I think, still a really great threat to us. And as we know, it is predicted that the worst is still coming. You know, and how do we really make it work in that environment? Anne-Marie, if you can click the video in the next slide. So I posted this on Facebook, and you might have seen it. And I thought it was a really interesting way to bring across a message about what the library, this particular library, will do when they actually open to the public. It talks about a lot of the things that I've said prior to this. And I'm not sure if it actually will play. It did struggle a little bit this morning initially. But if it doesn't play, it's maybe not such a great issue. And maybe we can rather start talking. It's now kind of 25 to 3, and I said we would go till about 3ish and then see how it goes. So go to the LIASA website, LIASA Facebook page. I posted this yesterday, and you can maybe have a look at the video there. But maybe we can start talking to each other. I think you must be tired of listening to me by now. I'm tired of listening to me by now. My throat is really dry now. So yeah, let's start talking. Questions. Before I open it up to everybody, there was something that I just want to address. I think everybody's concerned about when do we actually open to the public. If we take our cues from what the president said now the other night, and yeah, I'm specifically looking at a public library. I don't see that we would be able to open in level 3, being the kind of public space that we are. But possibly in level 3, we could start looking at limited services. And again, things like curbside issues, where people phone up, they say, I want a particular book, you leave it, you get it ready for them, they come and pick it up, etc. It makes it really difficult, I think, in those communities where maybe the library isn't used as a reading space, and maybe it's used as a study space. But I think those things we'll maybe only really see when we move to level 2. I know in the Western Cape, there's a recommendation that we will only move to opening to some degree at level 2, because of all the dynamics involved in actually opening to the public. But it'd be interesting to hear from everybody, wherever you are, what has been said to you. So yeah, I'm opening it up. Let's hear what everybody has to say.
Hi, Nazeem.
Hi, Linda.
Before colleagues could start share what are their fears, maybe what are their recommendations, I just want to say thank you so much for the presentation that you just did. There were some points that we could take home, but I also want people to start thinking about, after this webinar, maybe we can do some video clips that we can put online that can come up with recommendations. So if in your metro or public library or provincial library, you're thinking, oh, this could work in another small library, in another big library, you can take some video, send it to us, we can work on it and just put it up on Facebook so that we can start sharing ideas. The purpose of this webinar is to start sharing ideas because we're different. Thank you.
Sure. Okay. So, comments, questions, tips, recommendations. The floor is open to whoever wants to speak.
Hi, Nazeem.
Hi.
I just want to mention, sorry, I'm Larshan Naika, the head of user and research support at Rhodes University Library. I think from the academic perspective, I think we're looking at work plans at this current stage. All of us have to submit work plans as to how we propose to operate if the lockdown is lifted. It comes with its challenges. Each situation comes with its own challenges. but we've been looking at various areas, and you've mentioned many of them actually, in terms of having dedicated spaces that people can use, in terms of issuing and returning books at a central point and not allowing people in as such. That was one of the options.
Yeah.
In terms of spaces, we have decided to close off the public space of the library where you could find books, and we're going to have our staff as runners who will fetch the books for you. That was one of the options that we looked at. And the circulation desk, we have put in some screens like they have at the stores at the moment. We put in perspex screens at the circulation desk, so the contact is limited.
Okay.
And for those libraries that have self-check units at the priority area, have a staff member at the self-check unit who will be able to assist users so that they self-check their books and each, so that there's no contact as such. So the person's doing it themselves.
Okay.
Okay, in terms of sanitizing the building, I know this has become a huge issue that all libraries are looking at in terms of books. You can't use a wet product as such, a liquid product.
Yeah.
You can't use it causes damage to the books. We have explored the area. It's fogging. It's a smoke that they push into the library, which is fogging, that microbial fogging that would assist in that process if you can afford it. It's a very expensive exercise, but yeah. So I just thought I'd just mention that.
Okay. Thanks, Larshan.
Hello?
Hi.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Nazeem? Okay,
Yes.
I'm Takani from the city of Johannesburg.
Hello. Yeah, you people do amazing things. Eh? I'm really impressed by what you people are doing in Joburg. I must say that.
Oh, thank you very much. Nazeem, just to say that I heard you saying that you're going to start, you're going to open for the public in level 2, sorry, am I right?
Yeah, I think that's kind of the recommendation. And I think if we look at what the president said now the other night, I think libraries wouldn't open in level 3. I think we kind of clustered with all of those kind of spaces that wouldn't open in level 3. And I think from what I've seen in the Western Cape, there's been a document or communication that said we would only look at level 2.
Okay. With us, we are expected to go back to work in level 3.
Yeah.
However, as management, we're busy with plans, or we have submitted plans to say this is how we are going to phase in our working environment.
Okay.
We're looking at not opening immediately, but remember, this is a suggestion that still needs to be approved. Okay.
Sure.
We're looking at not opening our libraries, but work within libraries. Do work that does not include our public at the moment. Things like your stock taking, you know, checking and correcting all membership, collection development processes like weeding, mending, collection, you know, all those functions.
Yeah.
All those functions that can be done within our walls, including our e-learning services that can be done whilst the library is closed, and other functions, because we just feel at the moment that our staff are not ready. They haven't been trained, and we still don't have PPEs.
Yeah.
So we cannot just start opening, even for staff members. we're planning to phase in our staff members. Not all are going to start at the same time, but they're going to be phased in. So that is, in a nutshell, what we're looking at as Johannesburg City Libraries.
Okay. Thanks, Tsakani, for sharing. I think kind of what I've maybe left out, I think most staff are expected to go back as of next week. So I think even if we open in level 2, there is an expectation that staff would go back, even if it is in phases. And certainly, yes, I think you bring up a very important point around our staff and I think the emotional side of things. It's not just a matter of you've been on leave or it's the festive season and you've got an extended leave and now you're back. I think there's a psychological and emotional and a human toll on people having been away from work for so long that we've got to be cognizant of. And I think that if you're managing a space, that those are things I think that you've got to think about. You know, also looking at our staff who have underlying conditions. You know, we also a profession where we're kind of an aging profession. You know, we've got a lot of staff who are over 60 or approaching that age. You know, and that's vulnerable groups that we supposedly not be allowed to come back to work. I mean, what do you say to people who still, you know, still have a lot of work life left in them that, you know, they can't come to work because that's currently not doable. So I think we shouldn't neglect the psychological and emotional effects of what we need to do as a manager, as a staff member, as a colleague. And that we've got to take care of each other in that sense as well. And I think that's really important.
Extremely. Thank you.
Okay. Anybody? Comments? Yeah.
This is Laura speaking from the Central University of Technology. Nice to see you again.
Hello, Dora, the explorer.
Yes, I thank you for allowing us also as academics to join you guys, because
no problem.
Different libraries, the principles.
There we go.
So I heard about you referring to Denmark a few times. I've got a colleague in Trondheim in Norway, so he's like 2-3 weeks ahead of us. He's actually also in the public library, and they made a very cool video that for the day they actually opened their library, showing the social distancing, the 2 meters. I actually use a 2 meter apart distance. And then what I found very interesting, that nobody was wearing the masks, and they also had those perspex glasses that Charles was referring to. And I asked you about the face mask. You said that, but in Norway it's not by law. It's only the sick people that wear the mask. That was something interesting. And then the point that I want to come to is the whole notion of the quarantine of books. There's a lot of documentation being said. This one says 24 hours, that one says 48 hours. They actually contacted the Norway National Library, and they initially indicated 48 hours that the books must be under quarantine, and also use the principle of booking the book on the system beforehand, and then they just come and pick it up. But because things are sort of like normalizing now in Norway, he said probably within the next week or two they will do away with the quarantine. So I was thinking we should actually have something. But then he also commented on the fact that South Africa is much more densely populated than like Norway. So we might have conditions, and we're going to the winter season now. So it might be that we have some guidelines, i.e. from the National Library or somewhere, just to give us some. You feel so unsafe at this point in time about so many things that you have to discuss. And then just a quick comment on the glove story. And we also had a meeting with from our institution with two profs from the University of Free State, virologists and epidemiologists, and they indicated both that, like you said, gloves can sometimes be more of a burden because you just the disease as far as you go with the gloves.
Yeah.
Secondly, the gloves are being compromised if you use sanitizers with the gloves, because you see these white of yellow gloves that you wash your dishes with. It starts to or whatever. So then you think you're safe, and actually you're not safe.
Yeah.
So the
True.
first is the first line of defense is that you should rather use the hand sanitizers, but the winning prize is still to wash your hands.
No, that's true.
And then I would absolutely support the idea that we can start sharing ideas. I was desperately looking for something like that. There's a wonderful Facebook group as well for library managers where they share ideas. Predominantly actually public libraries, but there are some academic libraries, so that we can like I see Lashan is sharing some for us on the side as well. So please create something on either our Facebook page or our LIASA page where we can start sharing these things. And then I can also share other things that we've learned so far from discussions with other colleagues.
Sure. That would be great, Dora. Thank you. There was something I was going to pick up on what you said, and for the life of me, it's escaped me now. It will come back to me again. Thank you.
Pleasure.
Nazeem, Dani?
Yeah, Dani. Floor is yours.
Thank you. Also at UP, we already, and this is different from the public libraries in the academic library, we also have skeleton staff that already went into the library. And they scan material for postgraduate students.
Okay.
So that's one of the things. And there's not more than, I think, 5 people at a time in the staff in the library.
Okay.
So they are also looking at, when we go back, most probably on the 1st, that a third of the workforce is there.
Okay.
For us, we're in the unit or division where I am, we are 5 librarians, information specialists, and most probably we will go, every one of us will have a day of the week that we go into the library. So I don't know if that's something that the public librarians can have a look at, instead of everybody going in. One person go in on a Monday, other one on a Tuesday, and then that person again on the Wednesday, and so forth.
Yeah.
So that's also the things. And then we also look at spaces. We have a dedicated committee that looked at all of these things.
Okay.
One of the other things that we've, my son is in Pretoria Boys High. They said that the library will be closed.
Okay.
It won't open when the school is open. So they're not allowed to use the library because of the thing that they can gather there, don't have the social distancing that they need to have.
Yeah.
Because of those reasons, they are closing the library.
Okay.
But I think, like Larson also mentioned and said, that the spaces will be the social distancing. We will take away some of the computers, chairs at certain tables where they, so that the people can't sit next to each other.
Yeah, sure. Okay. No, that's cool. Just coming back to, I remembered what I wanted to say about what Dora had mentioned earlier to everybody. I think there is something coming up in the forthcoming LIASA in Touch around handling of materials. I think there is indicated that there is at least one article, and I think she has approached Dove to maybe do something for LIASA. For those of you maybe know him, you would know he's retired, but for years he's worked with materials like that. So I think that there will be something forthcoming in that regard as well. I think somebody wants to ask a question, make a comment. Go ahead.
Nazeem?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's Pondo speaking.
Hey,
I want.
hello.
Okay.
How's it in the Eastern Cape?
The Eastern Cape is it's raining in PE.
Okay, go ahead.
I just want to ask from Danny, and then he proposed that there is a committee that they created. How that committee works? Is it going to are we going to guide them, or are they going, because you are working in the public library? We do have library as a committee in the Friends of the Library. And now the majority of the committee that we have is over the 60. And I'm worried that and for them to advise us in the library, how can Danny share with us as a public library how the committee works, what it's going to be different with us as a public library, how they work in the academic library, their committee during this time. Can you just share with me so that we can be able to try to add what we hear on the committee so that we can be able to share on the public library committees?
Okay.
Spondo, it's myself is not on the committee, but it's not as big as the one that you have. I think we are only 7 or 9 people. And they look at things that Nazeem has discussed on spaces, protection gear, things like that you need to have.
Okay.
The university will not open for undergraduate students, only for postgraduate students. And any given time, there also has to be a certain amount of students on the campus. So all of the, say for instance, 1,000 cannot go to campus at one day. They have to divide also in smaller groups. So that is one of the things. And I think maybe one of the things, and my knowledge about the public libraries are limited in this sense, is maybe to control also people. Take away places where they can sit. Let people, say for instance, if the library can accommodate 5 people, let 5 people in. If one is going out, you let another one in. Things like that you have to do. And I've seen also that you have to sanitize where the people was. So one of the librarians must go and sanitize where the other people was. But also we have in the academic library, the shelvers, they go and take the books for the students. Or if they only want to make photocopies, they will do that for the students.
Okay. No,
I think also Swando, I think it's different in a public library because I think very often it would be library management that looks at it. And normally library management takes a cue from city management. And I think we've got to take those things into account as well. There are certain directives that a city manager will give and then cascades down to everybody. But I think, you know, as Dora had mentioned in her comments, I think the ideas and why we kind of did what we're doing today is that we will want to create a space somewhere where we can start sharing some of these things. And again, maybe not everything's going to be forthcoming from wherever you are situated, but that hopefully through the sharing of these ideas, you can look at your particular space and say, you know what, this is something I can actually implement here where I am. And maybe my group of people haven't thought about it. But here's something I can actually do in my space and share with my colleagues, etc. And I think that's part of why we wanting to do this today, is to create that platform where we can actually talk to each other and say, this is where we would like, this is what we would like to see happening, or this is what we've picked up some way. We think this could actually work in our spaces. So, you know, let's see how it goes, and let's see what comes up into these spaces. And I think just encourage everybody to share the ideas that you pick up. And I don't think any idea is too small to actually share. Even if it's a repeat of something, I think the more we talk about these things, I think the better it will be for us. I think there was a question from somebody. I think it was around quarantining. If you can maybe go ahead and ask the question, make the comment. Go ahead.
Okay. Thank you for the time. In your presentation on the issue of quarantining, you know, it got me thinking and a bit worried. In terms of really, if it is just a proposal that if you, we could probably curate more information about how to deal with it and have it somewhere to help us all on how to deal with it. Also added to that, the issue of cleaning, particularly toilets. Probably also could have more information on, you know, how to go about that.
All right. Can I just ask you, just tell me your name and where you're from?
Kensani Mlauzi from City of Joburg.
Oh, okay. Kensani, I think, again, I would like to say, you know, that we'll continue sharing these things. And I think the concern you're raising, I think, is a concern that everybody has, because it is those materials we're going to be handling. That I think we all in our minds think is going to be the greatest threat to us, because we don't know where it's been, we don't know how it's been handled, etc. So certainly, and that's why I mentioned the fact that I think there is something coming in this next LIASA in Touch, but we will also make it available to everybody. Yeah. Hello.
Hello, Nazeem.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's Sisha speaking here from KZN.
Hi there.
Yes. I was thinking, yes, since UNISA's academic calendar was never disrupted by this pandemic, if you could maybe open for them, because they are expected to write from home, their exams, they'll do them online. And we know that public libraries, we mainly service those distance learners, even with tertiary tech. We are, those are the ones that we service because they don't have their own academic libraries.
Sure.
So can we maybe try to accommodate them, because they are not in numbers per area, maybe 5, 6, and they're doing different disciplines. So if you could try and accommodate them, even if it means with computers, open for 3 or 5 of them. I think we need to do that because the UNISA's academic calendar is continuing as normal.
Okay. Yeah. I think there's all these permutations that we, you know, as we move closer to returning to work, they start coming out, and it's things that we need to think about. So I hadn't even thought about that one. But yeah, I think it's an important thing to think about. And again, you know, I think for everybody, it's going to be about what is the plan that is needed where you are, because I think every library is different. I think every community is different. And it's about what is that flow in your community. And I think one of the things I read somewhere online is that, you know, we've always been part of our communities in terms of public libraries, but in some ways, and I think what this virus has shown is that what we've always come to rely on as being the backbone of who we are has kind of been taken away. And you know, how are we going to connect with people if we can't connect the way we've always done? So we've got to look at ways of connection in a very different space. And the reality is, I think, and it's good you bring up the UNISA example. The reality for a lot of our public libraries are that people want to use the spaces to sit and study, to use a computer, not necessarily to read a fiction book. That is our reality, and how do we actually make that work? So yeah, certainly things for us to think about, and again, hopefully through the sharing platform, we can come to some things that we can actually look at and say, hey, you know, that can actually work in my space, or in the broader spaces that we're in. So yeah, thanks for that.
Thanks, man.
Sure.
Nazeem.
Yeah.
Lynette from Italy speaking.
Hi, Lynette.
From a school library perspective, what is the stance of browsing in the library? If a client goes and touches a book, and it goes to a next book and touches a book, where do we stand with that?
Oh my word. Oh, that's a difficult one. I think. Oh, next question.
Nazeem?
Sorry for that.
Nazeem,
No,
Donnie?
Yeah, Donnie.
Just something to think about.
Sure.
Lynette, sorry, I've seen Kari Botha. She's also at Boys Eye, and she's corrected me here. They are opening the library, but they do not allow, if I understand it correctly, and maybe she can come in here, that they won't allow the boys to browse around the books, but the computers are open. They only allow a certain amount of boys going to the computers, and that the boys have to clean the workstations when they are finished there.
Okay.
So maybe, Corey, if you listen, you can come in, yeah?
I'm listening. Now what I've decided is, because we have the 3 boarding houses and we have day boys that can't be collected directly after school or when the school ends and they have to sit somewhere, we are going to open up. So what we've decided is we have made different stations. So in front of the computer area, we've sanitizers and that big paper towel rolls. So the boys have to spray some of the sanitizer on the roll and then go to the computer and then clean the keyboard and the mouse in the working area where he'll be working. And once he's finished, he's got to go and spray it on a paper towel again and then just rub the keyboard again. And then we also limit it so that we're trying to keep 1.5 meters between every computer station. And then in the working areas, we've also taken away a lot of the chairs, and we've only put a few plastic chairs, and we're also keeping the distance of 1.5 meters between every chair at a table. So we're trying our best, and we've also got a sanitizing area there as well. So the boys are to go and collect, clean their working spot beforehand and afterwards. So
are you closing the shelves?
That they were, and then when they come in at the door, they have to clean their hands as well. So the feeling from the principal was that if they come in and they clean their hands, they should be, everything should be sanitized, So you've just got to have a strict thing of them cleaning everything before they start touching anything in the library. So we won't issue any books and we won't allow anything to go out to public, But whatever comes in, we will place in quarantine for, well, I was listening now, 48 hours.
Okay. Thank you very much for that.
That's the best we can do, and we've got to accommodate everybody, So I understand where the problem is with the boys. A very active library, so I mean, for them it's going to be a terrible. being limited to 30 boys at a given time, you know.
But I think it's an interesting point that you bring up, and I think that's partly kind of our role as well. I think is to install that kind of habits in people, and I think we shouldn't discard that role. It's, you know, how many roles must we still take on, I suppose, on the one hand, but it is a way to ensure that if they practice this in the library, then they will start practicing it beyond the library as well, and be more conscious of these things. Because otherwise, I mean, I was thinking, Lynette, about that video that was circulated a while ago.
Yes, I saw.
By, you know, that one where the librarian walks behind the person and sprays everything. I can't see us doing that the whole time.
No, we're not going to be able to. And the problem is going to persist in level 2 as well, when the library is open for circulating. So, yeah, it's a difficult one. I'm not sure.
Okay. And again, I think as we, I'm hoping that from this initial conversation, as we move forward, that we'll also start sharing when we do start going back. You know, what are the things that we're actually finding? What are we doing when we finally allow the public to come in some form or other? Because I think it is important for us to share that information as well, so that we learn from each other. So,
thank you, Nazeem.
I don't know if pleasure. I don't know if there's any other burning comments. I kind of said we would go until 3. It's now almost 3:15, but I don't want to cut people off if you really, really want to talk and you really want to say something. So please feel free.
Hi, Nazeem. I just want to make one more comment. Just that I think we must try and look at all the virtual services that we have and advertise them properly. A robust marketing strategy in marketing the virtual library more than the actual physical services. I think then people would know that they don't have to come to the library for every single thing. There are some services that you could do at home or remotely as such.
Yeah, I think there also needs to be an advocacy for funding to have more virtual services, because it is not equal in terms of how it's spread, and certainly not everybody can provide the same thing that the next one does. And that's why I kind of take my hat off to Joburg, because I look at the stuff that they do and I think, I really envy them. Yeah. But I think there is, you know, there's also this thing of, you know, what do we want to see coming out of this? What is the library service that we want to see coming out of this, and what do we need to agitate for? There's not been a lot of talk about, you know, what is the support that a library actually needs when we come out of this, in order to provide the kind of things that we really need to provide to our communities. And that's I think a question for a whole different day. But yeah, certainly I think we need to look at, you know, what are the virtual services that we can provide, and how do we make people aware that these are the things that we actually do provide. Good point. Anybody else? Because if there isn't, I want to propose that we close the session. I think I will speak to Linda about maybe us setting up another one. Please send us your comments, proposals, tips, whatever it is. Communicate with us. We will make the presentation available. I think Anna Marie will make the recording available as well for people to access after the fact. There are some email addresses in there. Drop us an email. Let us know whether you liked it, what you didn't like about it, what you would like us to do going forward. But certainly from Linda's perspective, the idea is that we will make other components available, even if it is just short video clips. But if you feel that we need another session like this where we can actually talk to each other, please let us know. And on that note, I want to say thank you to everyone who actually logged on today, that shared with us today, and hopefully this is the start of many more. Please be safe out there. Take care of yourselves, wear your masks, wash your hands. And yeah, one day, hopefully we'll get back to having an actual face-to-face conference where you can actually talk to each other. Maybe not hug each other, but yeah, that's going to take a while to get to. But I do want to say thank you very much. I want to say thank you very much to Anna Marie for hosting us. And thank you very much to Linda for inviting me to come and talk. You've been a great audience. It was really nerve-wracking getting up to this point, but I think it was okay. So thanks.
Nazeem?
Yeah, Dani.
Sorry, I see there's a few questions that people ask about public or staff that using public transport. I think they must just adhere to what the government is prescribed.
Yeah. No.
So they must please tell the staff to do that. And the other one, I think Manda was asking about if they're going to scan the people that is coming into the library.
Yeah.
So I don't know if there's funds that the libraries or government will give to libraries.
Yeah. I think it's a question of funding, Dani. And I think that's a question, you know, unfortunately we can't answer. It's up to every municipality to look at those questions. But certainly I think the understanding is that people are meant to be scanned when they come to work every day. And certainly I think we're meant to limit staff coming in by public transport. And again, I think it was you, Dani, who mentioned the fact that, you know, we need to look at how do we rotate people so that it's not everybody coming in, but limited staff coming in so that we also limit those things. Yeah. Okay.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, Nazeem. Thank you, Linda.
Okay.
Thank you.
Enjoy the rest of your day. Bye.
Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.
Bye.